So I would make sure, like a site that the president was going to visit was secure from that standpoint. We would go with the Secret Service at 2 to 3 weeks in advance of the visit, depending on how complex it was. We would fly in to set up a radio system that would support the Secret Service mission of protecting the president. There was one time we were in an airplane over Iran when I was sitting near the porthole and the engine blew up. And we'd already lost one other engine. So this big 4-engine transport could fly on 2 engines, but they landed at a base and would not let me walk around to the other side to the destroyed engine.
From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Danda.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable. Thank you so much for joining me today, Steve. I would love to know which superpower you're going to bring to this particular episode.
Thank you for having me. I'd like to talk about my team building superpower and how storytelling helps build those teams and get them moving in the right place.
Oh, brilliant. And you have a really interesting background, like a super, super interesting background. I would love if you could share some of that with us. And you can tell us the bits that you're allowed to tell us, because I'm sure there's some secret stuff you probably can't.
Yeah, there's still a little bit of that. But I grew up in Northern California in the Redwoods. I was outside all the time, of course, in my mind, creating scenarios, doing things. And growing up there also involved in sports and really, involved in team sports. And I like the team aspect of it. And we win together as a team, that aspect of it. So I joined the military in 1973. Yes, I'm that old. And I was going to stay in the Pacific Northwest, like Northern California, Oregon, Seattle, that area kind of thing, when some guys showed up at the basic training base with long hair, civilian clothes, and talking about traveling the world and working out of Washington. And my hand went up and it stayed up. And it turned out I ended up working at the White House, doing communications. And so it was just a wonderful place to be as a 19-year-old. My first trip out of the United States was Paris to Delhi to Dhaka, Bangladesh, and very eye-opening because I had spent a lifetime as a child reading my aunt and uncle's subscription of National Geographic, which was a gateway to the world, right? Such a great magazine back in those days. And so I spent 4.5 years doing communications, traveling around the world. I was actually responsible for, during a long part of that, for the actual radios that the Secret Service carried. So I knew a lot of Secret Service people. And so when my initial contract was up with the U.S. Army, I interviewed with the Secret Service and got a job over there. So my job was not to stand in a hallway, watching for the bad guys. Thank goodness. Mine was more technical. And so I was actually doing, looking for bombs, making sure the elevators not got a jury rigged or something bad. So I was in the background. I wasn't an agent following the president per se, but I was in a suit and had my explosive ordnance detail teams and disposal teams and things like that. So I would make sure, like a site that the president was going to visit was secure from that standpoint. So I did that for a couple years, and the last full year that I was in the Secret Service was a campaign year, much like this last one. And I traveled so much that they couldn't pay me any more money. I had exhausted all the money they could pay me, and I was just traveling for food. When I stopped that campaign year, I had clothes in 6 different cities, at dry cleaners. It was just that kind of crazy travel. And but it was a great experience. I went down to Florida, essentially went to work for our Department of Energy for a little while, then became a defense contractor. And was able to do defense contracting while also being a member of a special forces unit, um, very similar to how the SAS has some TA kind of units, that Territorial Army kind of units. So uh, that experience got me down into South America, things like that. So um, I had to build in the communications world. I had to build teams. Right. Initially, it was myself and one senior person till I started to learn what was going on. And then I would take a team and lead a team on a trip. And then when I was in the Secret Service, I would build these teams of law enforcement people and bomb dogs and have them doing things. And so the way I always came to the job was through storytelling. And I didn't realize this at the time, but a couple times I got told that I was also a good actor, that I should be undercover. And I resisted that because undercover is dangerous in a crazy world. But the storytelling, being able to get people excited about whatever it is you're going to do, get them on board, and then be able to use their creative ideas, right? Um, I always wanted my team to have different viewpoints, different ways of solving problems, and different ideas, right? A group of 10 of me, oh, that would be terrible. I, yeah, I want to be sort of the band leader, bringing all these different voices and ideas together. And so, when we talk about superpowers and creativity, that's what I really looked for in bringing teams together. And then later in life, when I had teams of, anywhere from 8 to 100 people, I it, I didn't care so much about your experience was interesting, but I wanted to know how you might solve a problem, how creative you were, right? And I always hired not for, like, say, to hit a certain ratio of this element of our culture or whatever, but for ideas and things like that. And that worked really well for me. It was to the point where I could say, "Okay, good," and then just get out of the way and only enter into the conversation to do maybe a quick checkup or to see if they needed something me to help them with something so that they could continue doing what they're doing. And, uh, when you can let go of your ego, see other people's creativity, and then let them express that, for me, I think that's a superpower, right? Because it's easy to be that kind of boss that's like, "Do this, do this, do this, do this. Here's a procedure manual, go do this," and right? "Here's the coding structure you must use, and you gotta use these tools, and it can only be in Python." That's not the only way to solve the problem. Right? Let people be creative, right? You've probably come across it, right? You're in the tech world too. I retired from cybersecurity and software development of cybersecurity products, and yeah, it was just I don't know. That's the ability to team up with other people and that storytelling to get them energized. I think that's really interesting to look back and say, yeah, that's really is it a superpower or is it something I just somehow my mentors helped me grow into? Uh, you know, I'll take it either way.
Oh, wow. There's so much to unpack there, Steve. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I totally agree. I think when we have all like-minded people that are almost clones of each other, then we're not really going to set the world on fire. And that's what I love about having this kind of diverse sort of group. I've had very diverse people on this podcast, actually. I had one young lady, 15 years old, and she'd published over 15 books by the age of 15. And she's a sensation on TikTok. I think she has over 50,000 followers. And I learned so much from her. Here's me, 40 something years old, interviewing this very young person. And she just had this mind that was so focused, laser sharp focused on the task at hand. And all she ever cares about is writing. And she wants to become like a world famous author. And it just blew my mind. So I totally am with you on that. I think we get inspired and we understand different perspectives when we have people from different backgrounds. How do you identify if a person is going to give you that? Like, do you have a way of reading people? Because sure, we could go out and bring a whole bunch of people together, but doesn't always mean they're going to have great ideas. Like, is there any ways in which you as a leader were able to spot that in people?
Yeah, some of it was to look where that person had taken the initiative to learn something. I once, um, found a young man who was, he'd interviewed to be, uh, on the sales team as an engineer, doing the demonstrations and talking to the customer initially, all those kind of software things, and they didn't think he was sales enough. I got to him after my boss had looked at his resume and said, "No, he's not a fit." And my team at the time was doing what we call professional services. We would install the product, train the customer, and then make sure they were good to carry on with the product. And Mark had all these spots where in different jobs, I'm like, "Did they send you to that school?" He's like, "No, I went and got that because I needed that to understand what I was, to do my job better." And so identifying that initiative and then the fact that he completed it and he had it looked like a weird set of certifications, but he was like an Oracle certified professional, things like that. So there were identifiers that once I was able to talk to him, it all came together and identified a really great employee. Um, you can you can always ask those questions, right? There's always those questions about, "Oh, what was your worst failure?" Or, you know, just the random questions that HR likes to throw at us sometimes that are so rote. I like to get into a discussion of a hard problem, how they figured it out, how they solved it, things like that. Um, and then oftentimes, I'm also, the empathy side of my superpower lets me hone on in, like, um, are they comfortable? And then also, are they starting to get excited when they're talking about this, right? Because passion goes a long way, right? People with passion will figure it out. And, so Mark had no background in the kind of software what we were doing other than that little bit of Oracle, the backend database kind of stuff. He was just an amazing hire. And, another, lady, uh, her name is Lisa, and she's still in the business and has grown, doing great. Um, it was the same kind of idea. She had been in um, the data center and the telecom business and things like that, and then when she came and the way her mind worked and stuff like that, it was like, "Oh, we here, yes, please sign here," you know? And so, um, when you can put aside here's the 32 questions you may ask, right? That HR maybe will let you ask and all the rules and regulations, especially here in America. Um, we can get by that and just have a conversation with people. It works out so much better, so much better.
I remember a time when I used to look at a CV and we were told if that person has jumped jobs too many times, like that implies they can't hack it in one place for too long. And now when we look at that, it's an advantage. As you mentioned, it shows that this person has a diverse set of experiences. And typically, if they have worked in a place for a number of months, that means they probably delivered the project and now they're done and they're going on to the next thing. So it's seen as a real strength. And it's just interesting how times have changed and our thought processes change a little bit as well.
Exactly. Our parents, and I'm a couple years older than you. I'm 70. So, but our parents, right? They would go to work someplace and stay, and they might stay with an automotive manufacturer or in the logging industry in the Northwest. Like my parents were all my 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 father, aunts, and uncle. Everybody was in uh, construction related to the logging industry or in one of the mills, things like that. And so um, you can get that there is if it depending on the job title, right? If somebody's been a CIO or a senior IT manager for 6 or 7 years at a place, and you see that they started off in a help desk, good sign, right? If they're a software developer, they're doing 12, 18 months. That's easy to understand too. It takes a little insight, right? That software developers will hop actually for the excitement of the new challenge, oftentimes money too, of course. But so you have to understand what you're hiring for, right? If you see somebody, I always having run a big help desk at the Pentagon, it was like I was getting people in and then trying to push them out into get more experience and move on up. And so you've got to pay attention to, who you're hiring, what for, and then what is the trend, right, within that group of talent, right? And developers are always an interesting one. Um, I stopped developing after Basic and a little bit of Fortran, you know. Yeah, but you're exactly right.
And I'd love to explore some of those early experiences you mentioned, and we've kind of just glossed over it. You said, "Oh, at the age of 19, I was employed for communications for the White House," and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like, tell us about that because you say communications. Break that down for me a little bit, and I'd
Right.
love to.
This is an old school definition. So I was not the communications office for the White House, with the daily briefings and all that kind of stuff. No, I was doing actual telephone, radio communications. So when I started, telephone switches still had plugs in them and people operated them, operators. And I would, for example, like I said, I worked on the radios that the Secret Service carried. But we also, when we would travel, the president would travel, we would go with the Secret Service 2 to 3 weeks in advance of the visit, depending on how complex it was. We would fly in to set up a radio system that would support the Secret Service mission of protecting the president. So whether he goes to one site or 7 sites in a city or, whatever the craziness is in a campaign, right? So we set up our own radio communications. Back in those days, we had pagers. We would set up switchboards. Um, some places because the presidents would visit New York all the time, there were switchboards already there. We didn't have to truck them up from DC. But we're going around with big cases, and military aircraft would fly us to, Mildenhall, let's say, or in the UK. Then if the president was gonna be in London, then if he went to the Cotswolds, right, we'd set it up so the Secret Service had all that communication. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun, crazy in some cases. I learned how to ski in Vail because the lieutenant commander or lieutenant colonel who was leading the trip, our first trip into Vail during the winter for President Ford, said, "Hey, we need somebody to ski behind the president with the backup to the backup radio kind of thing. Go take a lesson, Stratton." So literally, I took a lesson one day and was skiing behind the president the next, and trying not to run over him. and but hey, I'm young and crazy. I'll do anything. And once again, I was just raising my hand. It's like, oh, this sounds like fun. I don't know. Hopefully I don't hurt anybody. Skewer him with the ski. But yeah, I mean, between traveling all around the United States, um, the UK, um, the UK, Germany, France. I've been everywhere in Europe uh, until this year. I'd never been in Italy, so my wife and I finally went to Italy. But all over Europe, um, South America, uh, Poland, and Russia. So, it just depended on where the president or the vice president was traveling. And then also Henry Kissinger, when he was Secretary of State, we supported him until State Department, um, their diplomatic security team uh, expanded enough to protect Kissinger and things like that. So sometimes it'd just be myself and one other person. Like I spent a beautiful 3 weeks in Bali because Vice President Rockefeller was gonna show up for about 4 hours, and I had to be there early and set up and leave late. So that was you know, as a young sergeant who didn't make any money, there were a couple of times where, it worked out really nice, and I could take a few days off and come back later. Most of the time, my travel, and even in the Secret Service, was in and out, maybe 2 weeks. Maybe you get a half a day to explore the city. So I've been to all these places all over the world, but only got to see, part of it for a half day, that kind of thing like that. So I have this if I was to put pins in a map, you'd think, "Oh my god, world traveler," you know? And, yes, world traveler, but also in and out traveler, right? Like, just doing work. But, it was a good time. The campaign year in the Secret Service, that was the hardest year of I think of my life, just always on the go. Um, it sounds, exotic and you're on the travel, your Secret Service, you're wearing your Ray-Ban sunglasses and, you know, all this stuff. But it's hard, stressful work trying to protect somebody with highest profile as the president or the vice president of the United States. So like it is, like, prime minister of whatever country it might be in, wherever you're listening from.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they were teasing you, just letting you go to an exotic place and saying, "Right, you got 2 hours and that's it," and then you're sort of off to the next place. But in terms of those times, I mean, were there any moments that were, like, really scary that you sort of encountered some real danger in terms of the work that you were doing, and are you able to talk about it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The first one turned out to be, a non-event, but had us all on edge. Somebody left, like a lawyer's leather satchel outside the gate at the White House. And this is on, what we would call not at the front of the White House, on, the backside, the ellipse. And I was on duty, and it's like, "Okay, you're the technical guy, you go look at it." And I went over there, and the schools I went to about improvised explosives and things were all about the more times you go to the device, the less your chances of coming home are. So I went, I saw this satchel, there's no name tag on it, nothing, and it's just sitting there, and it's sort of rough and beat up. It's a well-used leather satchel. And, so I was bringing out the technical gear. I didn't have an X-ray. Back in the day, we used a thing called a fluoroscope, which it like project this, not an X-ray, but it would show up as a green light on the wall behind it. And it is radiation everywhere, spilling out everywhere. But you could look and see some outlines and see what might be in that satchel. Well, I didn't have one of those, so my only option is, I'm going to blow this thing up in place so it won't blow up. You essentially, this device, you essentially fill it with a fluid and then set off a blank behind it, and the fluid goes through the device so fast, it cuts the wires before the device can explode. It's called a disruptor. And I'm getting ready to set this thing up, and this guy walks up, and one of the White House policemen stops him, the uniform division Secret Service guy stops him, and he goes, "Hey, what are you doing with my satchel?" I'm like, "Dude, you know, I just lost 2 years just looking at this thing, because you left it laying there." So that was a non-event. Um, there were a couple other times where we thought we had, devices, you know, uh President Ford got shot at in San Francisco, things like that. So, directly in the line of fire, no, but, being around that and then, once again, luckily build a good team, have these really smart, like, bomb technicians, checking and helping me, out, made for, um less stressful than it could have been. There was one time we were in an airplane over Iran when I was sitting near the porthole and the engine blew up. And we'd already lost one other engine. So this big 4-engine transport could fly on 2 engines, but They landed at a base and would not let me walk around to the other side to the destroyed engine. So, one of those things, they kept it from me. I don't know if it was a rocket attack, something hit it, or it ingested a bird at altitude because we were supposed to land in Tehran. This is before the Shah got kicked out of the country, but, we ended up at this air base, somewhere else in the desert, when the plane rumbles and you don't have a parachute nearby, you start looking around going, "Okay, where's the nearest parachute?" Yeah, so a couple of times, during that portion of my, career, there were incidents that definitely, had me ready to take action, on edge, and a bit stressed. Yeah.
And what was the sort of working culture like? I'm guessing it's that sort of military culture and people, are they allowed to show emotion? Are they sort of having to depict this other persona that they're solid and they're rock solid, they've got no emotion? Like what kind of culture did you see back then and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so when I was in the military, there was some stoicism, right? A bit of a stoic kinda thing, but plenty of laughter. I've got pictures that I can't show anybody of me in the basement, at our radio center that we'd set up in Poland at the embassy and different things like that, and so they're funny pictures. They're not rude or anything like that, but just us goofing around with bottles and things like that, and taking pictures, and, so it was fun. It was, when you had to be on point serious, you did that, right? So, we set up, we check things, and then, like, an hour before when the when the president's or the vice president's aircraft gets so close that it's not gonna turn around and go back, game's on, and the game's on, and you're doing your job, and you're paying attention, and sure, you might be kidding each other and ribbing each other, but you're focused on getting the mission done until that airplane leaves, and it's past the point of no return back to where you're at. So they're gonna go on and it was always they're gonna leave because they can get refueled anywhere in the world being on a Air Force One kind of airplane, right? So, but then it was all fun and joking as we tear the sights down, we call it tear it down and box everything back up, get it ready to go. And then we'd have some pictures and have a little, departure party kind of idea so we could relax and those kind of things. Um, During a campaign year, there's no time for that. You're not having a party. You're loading everything up, getting on the plane, and going to the next spot, and you're because your friends are at this spot, now you gotta jump past them to the next spot, maybe 2 spots down the the campaign trail, right? Because they're happening so fast, you gotta get there set up and things like that. But that was more the exception. So, very professional, I mean, lucky enough that, shake hands with President Ford, Vice President Rockefeller, Carter, Mondale, um, Senator Kennedy, just a lot of people. And one of the things that being in being at the White House, right? I came from just a normal everyday American family. I had no idea what all those spoons and forks were doing on the table. So my mom had told me, "Yeah, just keep your hands in your lap and watch what other people do. If somebody reaches for a soup spoon because there's a bowl of soup, go ahead." You know? But it was what a great learning lesson to be 19, only have traveled up and down really the West Coast of America, one trip when I was teeny into Mexico, right, on the little donkey cart. But all of a sudden, I'm in Tehran interacting with the BAC Club, which is the British American Canadian Club, and, at the embassy on a Friday night, having a beer, throwing darts, losing badly, things like that, and just meeting all these wonderful people from all over the world, to include the locals, and, I was really blessed to be in that environment, actually, and learn how to interact and talk with a wide range of people once again, that idea, and feel comfortable interacting with them, even if if they're the oil minister, I don't know anything about oil at the time, just to be polite and ask them, simple questions, things like that. And so when I got into American Special Forces, the idea is to work through the partner country. So what do we have to do? We have to build partnerships, tell stories about how we're going to do things, do training and stuff like that. So it was very, very helpful. And I just recently saw another video where one of the commanding generals in U.S. Special Forces said, all good Special Forces soldiers are storytellers. You've got to be able to listen and then tell a story about how we can work together, uh, for the betterment of all our countries, especially coalition. I've worked alongside SAS and airborne troops, British airborne troops, and things like that. And so, um, once again, it was interesting how I had no clue, but it was all tying together like that. And at the time, I was going so fast, going forward so fast that I didn't take time for this kind of introspection. I had no idea what my superpower was, just that I really enjoyed doing that. I really enjoyed meeting other people, creating relationships, building teams, right? Doing that kind of thing. And so when I was in the civilian world eventually, that that turned into business development, sales, then leading software teams, being in product management, right, between the customer and the software developers, building the teams and getting the information to flow. Um, and it but until a decade ago, I just never stopped, took a breath and said, "Well, okay, what am I good at?" I just kept doing it. So,
Oh, it's fascinating the world that you've been in and sort of the journey that you've taken there, Steve. I could talk to you all day about those experiences, and I'd be like, "Oh, what was the coolest thing you saw?" Or "Who was the coolest person you met?" There's just so many questions I have. But I know in terms of your work, you mentioned kind of cybersecurity and all of that good stuff. So, are there what are the things we should be afraid of? Like, you must see some pretty crazy things going on in the background. Are there any things that you've seen that you think, "Oh, that's pretty scary," like what's happening out there?
yeah, the ability for, people who don't like either of our countries to get into our infrastructure, our power systems, our water treatment, is pretty scary. The question, really question comes down to, is it a worthwhile target? So most hackers don't care about me. I'm not sure about you, but I'm not a big return on their investment. They could get my information, sell it for a buck and a quarter, a pound 50. And then, uh, but what else is it worth, right? I don't have millions of dollars, things like that. I'm not a big healthcare company they can scam money out of, things like that. So, um, the the thing that, besides the infrastructure that I look at is that, it's really pretty easy to protect ourselves enough that we won't be a target just because, right, there's easier places to go or more money to be made elsewhere. I tell people all the time, create word and symbol-based passwords. And don't be scared not to if you don't remember it, it's okay. Use the password reset, right? Use two-factor authentication, and then what I do, because 'cause I've been in so many breaches, my data. Now, luckily, it's not been my what we call Social Security number, right, which is can be a key, but I change my passwords all the time because I can't remember them. I make them so long, but I change my passwords all the time. I look at my credit card statements and my bank's statements to make sure there's nothing strange going on. Had one of those recently where somewhere in I was looking at some software, um, and then somehow signed up for a free trial that ended, and then I got billed, And I'm like, wait a minute. I remember looking at the software, but I don't remember a free trial. Anyway, so, I was able to uh, call them and get that reversed, that kind of thing. So if you're creating good passwords, looking at your, essentially your receipts, you know what your spending was, you know what you spent your money on, you, your wife, that kind of thing. Um, and then the third thing is here in America, we have those credit bureaus, right? Like Experian and TransUnion, and they give you a credit score, which is really nice because in America, that helps you get loans. You can get better rates and things with a high score. It means you've had loans and you've paid the money back on time, things like that. But you can lock those, so nobody can open up a new account or open up a new credit card in your name. So there's a few simple things even people in like here in my retirement community can do. And they're not, they've got flip phones and they're not real tech savvy, but a few things that can be done that really are helpful. Um, your data might get swept up. There was the recent telecom hacks in America, and so once again, I sign up for all the alerts, right? Because I'm still interested in the space. And yeah, somebody got my address and my phone number. It's like, well, that's stuff that's irrelevant. They didn't get anything that somebody can't get just by doing a Google search on Steve Stratton. So um, that that helps take care of sort of the personal fear. At a national level, though, the infrastructure um, is a big thing. I mean, in the United States, it's not only that the hackers can get into it, but in the United States, most people don't understand the fragility of the electrical network, right? Because these are, I'm not sure how it is where you live, but we have Department of Energy that has power administration. We have the commercial businesses that give us power, and all these pieces of the network of the power grid are at different levels, and some of it's very old. And some of that equipment, those transformers aren't made anymore. Some of those big transformers, it takes a year to build, and they're in Germany or China. And so I think our government pushes for that for resiliency and protection, but it's profit based, so they're not they're not rushing. They'll give you fiber to your house so you can have higher speed internet and spend more money with them, but they're not giving you increased resiliency in the power. So things like that.
And it is a fascinating world. I've been recently introduced to a podcast called The Lazarus Heist by Jeff White. I'm not sure if you come across it, but it's on the BBC app. But it's all about the North Korean hackers and how they've been causing lots of interesting things in the background, lots of disruption. And it is just a fascinating world because I hadn't really looked into just how sort of dangerous this stuff can be and the extent to which they'll go. And in many ways, the creativity involved from a hacker's point of view is incredible. Like they'll try so many different ways, and in the Lazarus Heist podcast itself, it's the stories are just incredible. One minute they're hacking into a big bank, next minute they have people in casinos laundering the money and they're gambling it away, and there's just so many aspects to it. But yeah, it is a really fascinating world, isn't it? That
And it's interesting because those groups, and of course, if you're part of the GRU or the Russian SVR, you're backed by a nation state. So, but the hacker groups that are not associated with a nation, who like Cozy Bear and some of these other people, right? They think like a business, so they will do an investigation and look and say, okay, what's it going to take for us to infiltrate this? What value can we get out of the data we extract? Do we sell it to a data broker? Does it have instinctive value just to us that we can exploit? And so people don't realize this, but hackers have a cost of business, right? Right? They're spending their time looking at this target. Well, if they're spending their time looking at Steve Stratton, waste of time. If they're looking at Elon Musk, maybe not so much, right? Um, So, yeah, it's a very interesting world, and the different places that we can intercept that thought process. One of those thought processes was, back in the '80s, we thought, we just need to create this strong castle around our data, have a moat and have firewalls and all this good stuff. And we found out didn't work, right? You're only as strong as your weakest link kind of thing. Somebody's going to have a router misconfigured or something, and they're going to take it. They're going to find it and take advantage of it. Then it switched to, "Oh, we've gotta have the best of these different 13 different softwares." And now the thinking is, you know what? They're gonna get in. The question is, how do we protect the right data? Not so much that we're trying to limit them because we know, unfortunately, we know that the software we buy from these major companies who make billions of dollars from their sales, the hackers still get by it. The hackers still get through, right? Um, It takes a different level of hacker. It's not, the kid playing around with a rootkit, from a house in New Jersey or something like that, trying to hit up Morgan Stanley. But, um, so that whole mindset, how they work, how they think, is it nation state? Are they just are they looking to steal information like when there's a organization called Office of Management and Budget, and OMB kept all our military clearances, all our data. I mean, and the Chinese were able to get in and steal it. So everything about every, like, military contractor person associated with the Department of Defense, all that data went to China. Once again, now it's interesting to know maybe what clearances I have. Doesn't tell you what programs, specifically what I'm doing, but that, they're using that data to say, "Okay, well, Steve's retired. He's not really a target anymore, but, you might be. You're still working. What value is there in your coming through your, um, you to get into your organization or another one?" And so very complex environment, being on the defensive side, especially when you're looking at, like, blocking that development life cycle, because they spend time and they often think, like we do in software development, that they're going to do some investigation. They're going to try a few things. They'll surveil the environment. And here's a few points. Well, here's some code over here in the dark web that'll actually exploit that little opening right there. We might not even have it. We don't have to develop it. We'll go just buy this for $1,500, pop it in there, and we're inside. So lots of interesting thought around that. It that was a part of it. I didn't wanna retire, but I also did. It was time to, spend time with my wife and do some traveling and write some books and things like that, so.
Oh, talking about writing books, I see some behind you, and I know you're a keen writer. Could you tell us more about that, Steve? As to first of all, what led you there? Because going by your past, there's a lot that you've done, and now you're sort of trying this whole new area of writing. So yeah, I'd love to know what made you transition into this new world.
Yeah, so, in the past, I'd been what was called a product marketer, so I would write the brochure, write some messaging about a certain software, hardware product, whatever. Like when you see an ad for Microsoft or for, Windows or, Apple, things like that. And, I'd written proposals to the government to win business, when I was with a defense contractor. So I had some writing experience, but not like book writing. And, I did have this experience, in South America and Colombia and, training people to fight the drug cartels and things like that. And so, um, we had an incident in our family, where, my mother was killed by drug cartel people. Uh, they were under the influence of drugs and slammed into the site. It wasn't like she was murdered on purpose, but they were under the influence, crashed into the car, and killed my mom. And so there was a few months there where I wanted to invade Mexico and take revenge, and I was not happy. And some friends talked me down because 'cause I'd go straight to jail or end up dead. So that had happened like 7 dozen years ago. And in 2017, no, 2019, my wife said, "Why don't you? You've had this story." I'd done PowerPoints, I'd done picture boards, I'd done all kinds of things except write the story. She says, "Why don't you just write the story?" So I start writing, and it's terrible, but I'm writing the story. And then I found a gentleman who lives south of me, who's a 20 plus times best-selling author, and he was doing this class and sort of like a mentorship. His name's Jerry Jenkins, and he wrote a Christian story, a series that was very popular. And so I started doing this intensive work with him, and he would laugh and say, "Steve, we're writing a story, not a TV show," because I was hopping around in the scenes and going everywhere and stuff. But that's where I started to learn. And then I got online, once again, looking for other mentors, trying to get into the community, making friends, telling my story, getting feedback. And it's grown since there. So my first book came out in 2020 called Shadow Tier. My good guy, his name's Lance Bearwolf. He's Crow Indian, Native American. And I joked that it was sort of a simple book to write because it was all about revenge. It was right. He does figure out that he's getting too dark and too evil. And the quote at the front of the book is, right, "The best revenge is not to become like our enemies," right? Which is a Marcus Aurelius saying, right? So he it's sort of his journey through the book. The second book, and in the process of being in this fight against the one man against the Sinaloa cartel, he he entices some friends to come along with him and help. And he might use some government resources here and there to get some things done. Um, and they end up putting a team around him. So that's where the shadow tier comes from. It's not, it's not the SAS, it's not the special forces, it's the shadow tier level of operators who are going to go fight the drug war. Um, we could have a whole nother 4-hour discussion about the US drug war and the billions of dollars we spent and got nowhere. Um, but I didn't address that in the first book. I started to address it in the second book. Um, so I had a second book that took place. I came out in 22. Yeah. So I wrote in 20, book got published in 21, 22, second book. This year, I skipped a bit of time. I had a novella short book come out. And then the fourth book in the series is called Caribbean Harvest. And if you can see that, there it is. Caribbean Harvest. And this is where Lance chases El Chapo, who in my books is not in prison yet, but chases him into Cuba. And so I do use my special forces experience, my counter drug experience to write this series. I have another series of short stories I've started writing that are Secret Service focused. And um, that's interesting to write because I'm not writing current day. I don't want to get into the politics and the issues of what's going on today. But so I have a story from 1319 in Portugal with King Dennis, way back in medieval range. I've got a 1963 story in Dallas, Texas, uh, a 91 and 93 story. So I'm starting to write some Secret Service fiction, historical fiction. So I'll take a historical event and then put some fictional characters into it to of course try and make it more thrilling and interesting and things like that. So it's I get so lost in writing sometimes. It is so much fun when I'm creating. I don't Good news is I'm not doing sci-fi. I don't have to create new worlds, a new universe, that kind of thing. But I can just create characters and events and things like that. And it is, it's a blessing to have something to be excited about in retirement because I know so many people that have retired and gone, "What am I going to do now?" Their health declines, things like that. And so staying engaged and excited, I think, keeps me mobile, keeps me working, my brain thinking, right? And, I still get to build community and connect with people and I have a team of beta readers, right, who will read my stuff early and go, "Well, you forgot about that and you missed that, and wow, you can't spell, can you?" And, things like that. So, yeah, fun time.
Oh, it's incredible. Like, I just couldn't imagine. I'm trying to think of myself at 70 years old and what I would be doing, and I'm like, if I could be doing half of what you do, I'd feel like, I've made it in life. Like, that is amazing to be able to do something that you have a real passion for, and you're able to bring all of your experiences together, and that's a great thing. So, I was thinking, if there's somebody out there who's just starting their career or in the early stages of their career, having gone through many, many experiences yourself, are there a couple of bits of advice that you could give to them based on all of your learnings, maybe even some failings along the way?
Sure. Well, I I was very lucky that I volunteered for a lot of stuff without complete information, and it worked out. Um, don't be afraid to try something new. And guess what? If you go to college, you select what you think, what you want your career to be, and you get down that path and it's not working, it's okay, right? You it's not like the rules of the universe said, well, you made the choice, that's all you can do, right? You can choose to do something else. You can choose to pivot. Um, Cybersecurity is a great example of that. There are many, many people who never look at cybersecurity as a place to work because they don't think they're a hacker. And there's so many more jobs, right, than just on the keyboard developing software or hacking the bad guys or defending, the good guys. We need people who can manage projects. We need people who can lead teams, right? Like in software in the agile world, right? They call it a product owner. He or she's not coding. They're once again between the customers and the team, saying, here's something we need to develop because it's regulated. Here's something that we can develop that we can sell an extra add-on, things like that. So lots of capability. Don't let yourself get locked in. I know there's societal, cultural, or even, pressure from your parents. If you what that saying about if you love what you can do, you'll never work a day in your life, I think is really true. There will be times you'll have to grind. There'll be times and deadlines. There'll be bad bosses. There'll be great bosses. But you get to choose how you place yourself into that environment, how you react to it, right? And don't be afraid. Like I said with passwords, don't be afraid to change, right? If you know, your parents want you to be a doctor, but, you're excited about you love animals, be a vet, I'm not gonna tell anybody to be a dentist. I hate them. But, so, uh, yeah, just give yourself the freedom to explore and try new things, right? Try new things. I mean, there are lots of people who have a great life, just doing contract work, right? They never really work for anybody. They work for themselves. Maybe you spend a few years in a company getting experience, and then you go out and work as a contractor, and you get to choose and pick and take a vacation for a month and then come back and work some more. I mean, all the options nowadays versus that 9 to 5 at the desk or making widgets like our parents did make it really exciting. And one other thing, be a lifelong learner. One of the things that keeps me from being labeled as a boomer oftentimes and why I can relate to young people is because, like you said, I can learn from a 15-year-old. I can learn from my 8-year-old grandson. He's got like an encyclopedic brain. It's crazy. So don't be afraid to learn. Don't let the ego get in the way, and enjoy the process, knowing that if something doesn't work, if something's painful or whatever, make a change. You can do it. You can make a change.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Steve. Yeah, some golden nuggets of advice there. And I sure will follow some of that myself now. So thank you. And Steve, one question that I always finish off the show on, and I didn't give you any pre-warning of this, but it's one of my fun questions is, if you could have any superpower to abolish something in the world of work, so this is something that really knocks you, this is the thing that you think, oh, I wish this was banned in the world of work. What would that be? And we're only going to do it for 24 hours because we're going to do a trial in case it doesn't work out. So
Anything in the world that I would like to get rid of or ban, yeah.
in the world of work, yeah, work
In the
related.
world of work, yeah. I think, that's an interesting question. I would ban expectations that are tied to, "We've always done it this way." Phew. I would lop that off with a big scimitar. I'd stop it. That there was, there's been a couple times where my viewpoint and that of butted heads, and I've left organizations because of it. I didn't go to a military academy. I didn't go to our version of Sandhurst or that kind of thing because it's so structured. This is the way we do it. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not a former California hippie, free bird, happy person, but and I like structure, but it's like, man, if you tell me that there's only one way to do things, or this is the way we've always done it, first thing I'm thinking of is, wow, that's bad. Either I need to go or we need to change this. So anyway, that'd be what I'd get rid of, was that those guardrails or those handcuffs, right?
Great. We're going to do it. We're going to do that. So for 24 hours, folks, you're not allowed to say that we've always done it this way. We've got to be open-minded and we're going to try new ideas. So there we go. Let's give it a go. And we'll see if that works.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Steve. And before we wrap up, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way that they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Stephen Stratton, STEVEN STRATTON, USA.com. That's my website. You can reach me through the website. It has my emails and different things. I'm on X at Stratton Books. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, all that social media stuff we got to do nowadays as authors and creators and creatives. And so, yeah, you can find me on the interwebs or here in Colorado, enjoying the beautiful, warm, no snow day for some reason. So.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Steve, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you over this last hour or so, and time has just flown by. I've certainly become a lot wiser, I feel, over that time. So I really just appreciate you sharing all of those amazing experiences and your insights.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a joy, and I look forward to continuing our relationship.
It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.